I want to take a minute to talk about today, specifically this day. And this day, 3 years ago, I had discovered a poem that my father had written. I don't know when, and it was kind of a rough draft. But what had happened was I came back from, I guess it would have been Poland. And when I came back from Poland, I went up to my mother's house. And I was living in El Paso at the time. So I went up to Chanute, Kansas, and oh my gosh, that's 11, 12-hour drive, maybe a little bit longer with stops. And I made the decision that I was going to take my father's old workbench, one that was there basically my entire life, in the garage when we lived in Broken Arrow, or in his workshop when we lived, in Chanute. At both of the houses we lived in there. And then, he had his woodworking business. And I remember that shop, it had a drill press on it, had a vise, and it was always messy and chaotic. It was a challenge or a chore to keep that workbench clean. He had built a desk that he used, and but the workbench, it was covered in sawdust and everything. Well, after my father passed away, I, went through the garage and got rid of a whole bunch of stuff, cleaned it out, put new garage doors in for my mother, one of them being an electric garage door. And really, one of the only things that was left was this workbench. And that was left from the woodworking days. And I wanted to start getting into woodworking a little bit more in my adult life. I kind of turned my back on it for many years. And, I held a little animosity and anger about working so hard and missing out on, summers and hanging out with friends in school, because I had to help, my mother and father out in the shop doing woodworking. So I really turned my back on it. But the time was right, and I just felt, I wanted to get back into it. So made this long drive up to Chanute, and ended up loading this workbench, took it apart, took everything out of all the drawers, the cabinets. I took the top pegboard piece off. I loaded it all up in my truck, and I drove it all the way down to El Paso. It wasn't covered up. It was in the bed of my truck. I had to keep the tailgate down, but I strapped it all in. There was nothing in this workbench. I had totally cleaned it out. Cleaned all the dust off of it, loaded it up in the truck, and drove to El Paso. When I pulled in, or backed into my driveway in El Paso, I started figuring out how I was going to download this. It was just myself, and it was a heavy workbench. Oh man, workbench got to be 45, 50 years old, but heavy workbench. So I started, pulling on it from the back after I unstrapped it, and I stopped and walked around the side of the truck to see how far I was, or how much more room I had, because I didn't want it to fall off the tailgate. And when I did, out of one of the drawers, or where one of the drawers would have been, there was a sheet of paper that was folded in thirds, like you would just stick it in an envelope. And I stopped, and it blew my mind. I thought it was trash, maybe I picked up on the road, whatever. But I kind of stopped, and I took this letter out. It was really dusty. knocked the dust off of it. And it was a poem that my father had worked on. And it was titled This Day. And this is how it goes. This day. This day is a gift from God. Though things may not always go as planned, this day is great because it is a gift from God. Another to enjoy with my family and friends. Another to succeed where I before have failed. This day is great, for I know my Lord, and He does love me. This day is great, as it belongs to God, and He lets me do with it whatever I will. Now that is some pretty powerful words, and I'm going to tell you, I was 41 years old pulling this letter off of a workbench that I just drove 12 hours along the highway, in some spots speeds of 80 miles an hour. There was nothing in this workbench, and in my driveway in El Paso, Texas, there's this letter that is probably only the corner of it is hanging out, and it had traveled that far. Why did I not see it when I emptied the whole entire workbench out? Why? Why did I discover that? You know, the Lord works in mysterious ways, and I feel like I've been a pretty lucky person my entire life. Whether it's my career, the opportunities that I've had, and everything. But over the years, I've really lost touch with my connection with the Lord. You know, I mean, this was 10 years after my father had passed away. And I find this letter that just reaffirms to me, you know, the fact that my father valued his relationship with God. Things didn't always go the way he planned. He enjoyed time with his family and friends. He admits failures. You know, you can really see the things that were going on with him in his life through these words. But yet, he knows that every day belongs to the Lord. And it is God that lets us do with that day, you know, whatever that we will. You know, this day is great. It belongs to God, and He lets me do with it whatever I will. You know, it was just powerful. I'm going to tell you, 41 years old, standing in my driveway, looking at this dusty old letter. I'm going to tell you, it brought tears to my eyes. It really did. It was very special to me. It was almost reaffirming to me. And I'm going to tell you, I posted this on Facebook when it happened. I typed it all out, put it on Facebook. I took some pictures of it. I ended up folding the letter and I stuck it back on a shelf in the workbench. And I had a soldier at one point in time. While I was in El Paso, I was in the garage. I was sitting next to the workbench. Soldier pulls up. And he wants to harm himself. He's going through an immense amount of stress and pressure in his personal life. And I'm sitting there counseling the soldier. He stopped by my home over a weekend to give me the guns that he had at his house because he was scared he was going to use them to inflict harm on himself. It was powerful. The tears and emotions that were coming from the soldier, I couldn't even imagine. He was in an immense amount of pain. I talked to the soldier for a couple hours, and a beam of light was shining through a crack in the garage door on the shelf where I had this poem that my father had wrote. And it was like all the timing, the counseling, the emotions, and the things that we were talking about at the time. This poem just really fit that situation. I didn't think about it. It was covered in dust again because, I had done woodworking and forgot I put it on the shelf. And when I saw that beam of light shining on that poem, I moved some stuff out of the way on the shelf, pulled that off, knocked the dust off of it, opened it up, and it became part of our counseling session. We were sitting in my garage. I have a grown man sitting there next to me, in pain, wanting to hurt himself, needing some reassurance that things are going to be all right in his life with everything going on. And I read him this poem, and he was in tears. It hit him on such an emotional level. I ended up giving him the letter that had traveled so many miles with me that I didn't even know about. I have no idea when my father wrote it. I have no idea why it didn't blow out of the bed of the truck, if it was stuck in there, or if it was divine intervention that this poem had actually traveled for that specific soldier because he needed it, and he needed those words. He needed to hear it. It hit me on an emotional level. I'm a little saddened that I still don't have the original letter that was written, but I take comfort in the fact that these words every year come up as a reminder to me. On October 6th, every year, Facebook is reminding me of this. I mean, this day is a gift. It is a gift from God. Those, things may not always go as planned, but this day is great because it is a gift from God. Another to enjoy with our family and friends, another to succeed where we have failed. This day is great. I know my Lord, and He does love me. This day is great. It belongs to God, and He lets me do with it whatever I will. I think that's important. I really, wish I could talk to my dad and tell him how much that meant to me to read it. And every year seems like I need to realize that again and reflect a little bit on what I've been doing with my days. Have I just been letting them waste away, or have I been building for something better? We all have failures. We all go through struggles and don't pay our family and friends as much of attention as we should. But the Lord still loves us. He gives us every day that we have. And He lets us do whatever we want with those days. Are we taking advantage of that? Are we really using the days that the Lord gives us to our fullest potential? Or are we just letting them slip away? We're not guaranteed any of these days. They all belong to the higher power. We don't even know how many days we will have. So why don't we make the most of them? I challenge everybody, just take a little bit of time. Take a little bit of time the next couple days and do something that you've been wanting to do. Something that's going to make you better. Take some time to reflect on how you've been using your time and what you should do to improve your situation. Whether it's life or relationships or job or your automobile, the meals that you eat, take a little bit of time, improve that situation. Use that time that God gives us and do something great with it. I love you all, and I hope you all keep me in your hearts and minds as we embark on a journey for inspiration to help each other out. Thank you.